play in the West End, which is like Broadway in London. And here I was being asked to play what might be a jumped-up Dalek. You know, why would I do that? So I said, no, thank you. And she said, what do you mean? And she said, and I'm going to miss out a word here because there are children, but she said, don't be so stupid. You do not know what it might lead to. So I go off to Soho Square in London in the film land to 20th Century Fox. I knocked on the big door and they let me in, and eventually I went into a room where I was about to meet this big Hollywood producer, like you see in movies, you know, cigar, fat belly, attitude. And there's George. George in a pair of jeans, and what was he wearing up here? A plaid shirt. And it was like, hi. Good morning. So you're an actor? Yes. And you're good at mime? Well, quite good, yes. You see, English people are taught not to be boastful. It wasn't until I came to America that I learned there was another way of doing things. So we had this great silence. We had that, and we tried to make conversation. It was quite odd. And then I realized behind him on the wall was a lot of paintings around the office, concept paintings, how the film might look. There was a thing that would eventually become the Death Star, a thing that would eventually become Darth Vader. And then here, a lonely figure on a strange planet with a little box of mechanics by his side. And I walked over and I said, is this the character? Oh, sure. And I looked into the eyes of the painting, which was nothing to do with me. I'm not an artist, I can't paint. I looked into the eyes of the painting, and the eyes looked straight back at me, that strange face that's utterly calm, but utterly lost. And I don't want to say I fell in love, because that'd be totally weird. Well, not for some of you, obviously, but for me it would have been totally weird. And that was it, I was hooked. And we talked some more, and then I went away and they sent the script. And I read it, I tried to read it, it was impossible. Difficult enough to see it as a movie, to read it as a script. But I got the fact that this robot was a very interesting character. He happened to be made of metal, but that was the only difference between him and humanity. And there was a depth of humanity within the way I read it, the way I saw it. And so I went back the next day, and I went in, and now I was interested, and a little nervous, I suppose, but you know, so you read the script? Yeah, yes. Oh, what do you think? I had no idea what it was about, except, so we talked for another hour, and there was a line of people waiting outside to be auditioned, because he was seeing people every 5 minutes. And at the end of it, after like an hour, I said, please, may I play the part? Sure. Seriously, I've said before, that one sound, it wasn't even a word, sure. It was like a burp, you know. So the next day I am at Elstree Studios with no clothes on. And there were two men in the room, the same room. They got clothes, they're dressed as builders. And they're mixing buckets of plaster. Anybody heard me tell this story before? It's absolutely true. I am standing there, holding on to a couple of sticks to make sure I stay in the same position, and they're mixing plaster of Paris and water, and they're using words like, oh, it's going round now, it's going nice and round now, yeah, I think it's ready. Slapped me all over with plaster in two halves, and eventually we ended up with a statue, an absolute perfect facsimile of my imperfect body. To see yourself in white plaster with every wrinkle, nook and cranny, it's not a pretty sight. Well, certainly not in your case. But I'm kidding. Not really. But then Liz Moore, the sculptor, took modelling clay, just like you'd have in an art school, and she made She built up using my body as the sort of basis for it so that I might eventually fit inside. She made the figure that you see. And one of the huge sadnesses is that she was killed in a car crash as we began filming. So she never got to see her creation of C-3PO being around the world and much loved as he is. And here's the other sadness and joy of getting older, that years later I could say to Ralph McQuarrie, whose original painting that had been, I saw him at some event and I said, "This is all your fault." And dear Ralph died just a few weeks ago. And I'm thrilled that I had the opportunity to blame him for the entire thing. Because without his work, I would not be in that movie. Then, of course, we come on to The Voice. So I spent 6 months working on the script, working on the costume, and suddenly I'm all dressed up and out there with no rehearsal, nothing, just like action. Does anybody, well, of course we shoot things. What is the first line of A New Hope? Yes? Oh God, no, it's Carl. I can't have Carl. Carl, come and sit here.